Let's Get To presents Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball.
And we're back here on Go Astros All-Star Break Edition, which the cool thing is, Andy and Brian, we don't have to talk about the series against the A's because we have an entire first half of a season to talk about, which is some kind of baseball miracle.
Hold on. I was assured by Astros Twitter yesterday that the sky was falling. This was the worst loss ever, and the Mariners are going to pass us probably by Thursday.
There was somebody that commented, so I'm sure you guys saw it. McTaggart tweeted out all the kind of statistics for the first half, and someone says, you didn't mention that they lost 9 games in the last 2 weeks. And I said, they lost 3.5 games in the last 11 days. Like, let's calm down. Andy, yeah, the sky's falling for some of them, isn't it?
Just the same way. I guess this means our fan base has grown up, because it's the same way that Yankees Twitter was melting down when they lost 2 or 3 to the Reds about a week ago. And the Reds are arguably a worse team than the A's, although, I mean, it's neck and neck.
Disagree, but
race to the bottom.
It is what it is. Baseball is a 162 game season. You are going to lose 50 games no matter what you do. You're going to win 50 games no matter what you do. It's what you do with those other 62 that makes the difference in your season. And so far, the Astros have a lot of black in their ledger. It's disappointing, but the way I look at this past weekend series was the A's took one, the Astros took one, Major League Baseball scheduling machine took the opener.
Well, that's true, right, Brian? Like, that lineup they trotted out there on Friday was intended to give everybody a nap because they got in at 5 a.m, which I really think Major League Baseball needs to start setting some actual rules as far as, hey, if you've got a getaway game and a game the next day in a different time zone, much less 2, you start that game at 1 o'clock.
Yeah, because I think the current rule is you have to start it before 6, which is not really useful when it's on the West Coast, and therefore it was at regular ball game time. It was 8 o'clock here on the East Coast, 7 o'clock there. And again, they got it at 5 o'clock. Again, as Andy says, I'm sure if we went through the other 29 teams, we can find, things where the schedule didn't work out in their favor. You have to play through it. And the good news is the Astros, except for 3 people, have, except for 2 players really, have 3 days off to rest, relax, recuperate, and apparently they're going to go to the Man City Club America game on Wednesday at NRG. So enjoy that, gentlemen.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the first half before we talk about the stupid beginning to the second half. Talk about scheduling stuff. It's I think the second best winning percentage the Astros have ever had at the All-Star break. 59 wins, 9-game lead, which is better than even the 2019 Astros, which is the team we all sort of agree is the best team to do it. I give the Astros an A in the first half grade. Andy, what about you? What is your first half grade for the Astros?
I'm an A-, and some of that's level of competition. And I say that knowing everybody plays the same teams. Major League Baseball doesn't have a lot of winning teams or a lot of good teams this year. So there are some things that I have concern about. Not that they haven't done well, just that there's some pieces that I don't know that the franchise has addressed to date, other than kind of shuffling the chairs on the deck a little bit. But having said all that, if you told me that Yuli Gurriel was going to bat under 240, Alex Bregman was going to bat under 250, that Altuve would miss time, that Yordan Alvarez would miss time, that Lance McCullers Jr. wasn't going to pitch at all, that Odorizzi would have a career-ending injury that he miraculously healed from, like Jesus Christ, on the 3rd day. All those things, and then tell me that we're at 59 wins at the All-Star break, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. So it's been almost all positive, and the concerns I have are the concerns I would have if we had won yesterday too.
Brian?
Yeah, and Andy lists all the things that haven't gone well, so I'll get to list the things that went well. Framber Valdez has developed into an all-star level pitcher. Christian Javier has developed into a high quality starting pitcher with an emphasis on the word starting, because we weren't sure of that at any point in his career. Now he's definitely a starting pitcher. Jeremy Payne exceeded everyone's expectations, and frankly, probably even exceeded James Click's expectations, and he's one who had the highest expectations on him. Cal Tucker is one of the best players in Major League Baseball. And who's the best hitter in Major League Baseball? There are two candidates. One is Juan Soto, and the other is Yordan Alvarez of your Houston Astros.
Future Astro Juan Soto.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure that for a package of Chas McCormick and JJ Matichevich, he'll be in Houston on August 2nd. Absolutely.
We're going to have to give up something, so throw in Pedro Leon.
Yeah, we'll give him Pedro Leon and we'll give him Jason Castro for some veteran, and then we're good. That's my favorite part about Twitter fan. Like, they never propose a trade that actually is equitable. It's always the garbage. Trade him. Well, if you think he sucks, who else wants him?
I'm guilty as everybody else, but I got into a conversation with somebody and they were talking about what you would have to do to acquire Soto. And I said, well, you start with Yordan Alvarez because there's nobody else in the roster that makes sense for Washington where they are in their development cycle. No, you can't do that's not even. Then shut up, because that's the issue. We don't have prospects, which I'm sure we're about to talk about. We don't have the prospects to deal in that stratosphere unless Washington is just stupid, because there are going to be.
There's a possibility.
Always, because you look at what we ended up giving up for Justin Verlander, which hasn't turned out to be much.
Yeah, that was actually going to be one of my fun questions at the end. We'll get to that. I guess the only thing is, and it's not like Juan Soto has a big contract, right, that they're going to try to offload. No. Like, it'd be one thing if it was a Zach Greinke style contract and they just want to dump the salary, but that's not the case. He's still playing on that sort of first deal, right?
Yeah, he's at $17 million this year, which is the highest ever for a guy in his first year of arbitration. So, you'll pay him, but you'd get him for 3 playoff runs. And maybe they'd make an exception to the, 5 year. We only offer a 5-year contract or a 6-year contract. But to Andy's point, they would have to unload. They would have to unload pieces off the major league team. And I'm not sure that's what Washington actually wants right now. They may want guys with 6 years of service time, and other teams have when it comes to just prospects. Well, the trade that has been most sort of compared to a potential Soto trade is the trade of Miguel Cabrera from the Marlins to the Tigers. The Tigers gave up 2 top 10 prospects.
Yeah.
And they also had to take on salary and another lower level prospect. Now the trade worked out for the Tigers because the prospects they gave up were Cameron Maybin and Andrew Miller, who were decent major leaguers, but made you question how they got that high in the prospect rankings. So it's unlikely the Nationals will win this trade.
Tools. They had tools.
Yeah.
Tools.
Well, let's talk about the system. It's funny because Brian, I want you to address this first, because one of the things that I don't know how much you guys see the compliments we get on the show, but we get a lot of compliments on the show for being very even-handed and realistic. And Brian, you pointed out that when people say the farm system is weak, they're not wrong. That, and as I said in one of our things, the fact is everybody's surprised how we're able to find diamonds in the rough, which tells you they're not valued by Major League Baseball. Explain to the people why people see the Astros farm system as being weak and why I think they're right. I mean, It is.
Yeah. So I published yesterday on my Substack an article looking ahead to the trade deadline. And the major point I made was that the Astros have limited prospect capital, and that's going to limit what they do. Now, it's controversial, and I got, particularly on a Facebook group, I put it on, some people saying, no, that's a much better farm system. And people always say this. And 2 things are true about that. One is, this front office, particularly the James Click version of the front office, has done a really good job of identifying which of their AAA players are ready for the majors, and that's absolutely an asset. But 2, if other people don't perceive your guys as good as they are, that may be an evaluation mistake by them. They may be screwing that up, but it's really hard to trade with people and saying, no, he's really better than you think they are. Just, trust me.
Andy, do you want to follow up on that?
Well,
Especially Andy, having watched the Hooks you watched the Hooks last week.
yeah, and they're not good. There's Luke Berryhill looked okay, but
Then
it
he
was
got hurt.
it was a collection of spares. And it's not my fault that Luke Berryhill got hurt. I was not trying to get him to sing any songs or get his autograph or anything like that. It's a volume issue for me. So it's not necessarily that the Astros farm system can't develop Jeremy Pena. Is that they only have Jeremy Pena, and they might only have Pedro Leon next year, and they might only have this guy or that guy. And if you look at the teams that are at the top of those rankings, they have scores of Jeremy Pena. And maybe Jeremy Pena turns out to be the best of those guys, but it's like buying a lottery ticket. The more chances you buy, the better you are, the better chances you have to win. Even if those chances are infinitesimal, you have, I just made up a word, sorry. Today's episode is brought to you by Ricola and many other drugs that got me to work today. But it's the Astros have not given themselves a lot of chances because they've decided to be very active in the trade deadline market to acquire the Garrett Coles. Would we be better? Would we feel better today if Joe Musgrove was still in the rotation with the Astros? Absolutely. But we really liked having Garrett Cole. Would we feel better if we had kept any of the 4 guys that we sent to Arizona for Zach Greinke? Maybe, and that trade worked out in our favor, but still that's 4 guys that would make our farm system look better because you'd have those bodies in your farm system. Even trading away some of the guys last year for the fix of the bullpen. And then you add to that the penalty that we had for the cheating scandal. With not having a first-round draft pick or a second-round draft pick. I think I tweeted Jim last night going, we were allowed to draft a player last night, which is the first time in 3 years. Congratulations to us.
Brian, you were going to add something?
Yeah, I'll just add on that point. The Astros sent two recent first-round draft picks and a second-round draft pick to the Diamondbacks in the Zach Greinke trade. They don't have, one of the things I looked at is Fangraphs had a list of, everyone's farm system ranking and the number of players they ranked as being potential major leaguers. The Astros had 33. It was, I think, the 3rd or 4th lowest. Well, if you add in 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks from the last 2 drafts, they'd be at 37. They'd be at a better number there and have more capital to trade. So it is something that has hurt them. It's part of their punishment, and it'll have some effects for. Modest effects for years.
Dodger Twitter tells me the Astros weren't punished. That's weird. No, to Andy's point, developing onesie twosies at the state that the Astros are in is fine, and it is sustainable. It does come down to if you're trying to trade for somebody that's a major impact, it's harder to do when you don't have those chips to throw in kind of deal.
Well, yeah, and part of the
conclusion
that is that they won't be able to sort of buy at the top of the market. Wilson Contreras was the example I used. Do you want to upgrade on Maldonado at catcher? The front office may evaluate that Contreras' offensive contributions outweigh Maldonado's defensive contributions, his contributions managing the pitching staff, but I don't think they can win a bidding war for him against, the 4 or 5 other teams who could use an upgrade at catcher. They're more likely, therefore, to get an upgrade in the bullpen, where, you can always get an arm for a bullpen. Last year, they traded some, basically utility men for bullpen rentals. And the other place where there's a lot of candidates on the market, and therefore the price is down, is at first base.
Andy, you had something to add to that too?
Well, I mean, it may not be a great analogy, but ultimately it's like winning races with grease lightning. You probably can win that race if everything goes right. If Jeremy Pena is developed correctly, he's your grease lightning. You can win that Rookie of the Year race. But other teams are going to have more chances to do that.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is the Astros have been very shrewd in what they've gotten away with at the cost of their organizational development rankings. So Seth Beer is one of those first-round picks that we got rid of to Arizona, and he may have a fine career, but to date, he's had 90 at bats in the majors. He's hit 2 home runs. He has an OPS of 664.
Well, I actually remember when he was drafted, there was a lot, like there was already doubt whether he was actually a fit for the major leagues. Like it sort of was the best player available situation, but there was a lot of people questioning whether his skills translated.
I think he was also the best player that was willing to sign at that slot, which was always a big, and it's always going to be a big concern for the Astros front office. But to that point, if he's sitting in our AAA team in Sugarland right now, that looks a lot better organizationally. That might be enough to have us in the top 20 instead of the bottom 10. I think people you said something negative about the Astros, you're anti-Astros, and I can understand that because especially in the cybersphere, there's a lot of that. Everything's orange team bad, but it's not an insult to say, and it's not mutually exclusive to say the Astros can develop talent. They also don't have a big pool to work from.
Yeah. I mean, and they had a great talent pool in 2014. Would you rather go back to that year, or would you rather be living in what we're living in now, Brian?
Yeah, and they had multiple candidates, and it goes back to Andy's point. They had multiple prospects in their system at that time. Some turned into Alex Bregman, some turned into Carlos Correa, and some turned into Francis Martes.
I have a Daz Cameron card around here somewhere.
Daz Cameron got us a third of Justin Verlander.
Exactly.
So
Well, yeah, I think we could definitely talk about sort of and I do give Astros Twitter a break for how defensive they get, because it's almost like post-traumatic stress, right? Like they're just used to people coming at them. But there's also, I think, the thing that Andy and I have called it before of Astros fandom has football syndrome. They're not used to actually being baseball fans. They don't understand how this all works. The one thing the Astros do have that might help them at the trade deadline is a lot of money to spend. So if there is a high-priced player that somebody's trying to dump, that could work in their favor. I do think, and I wanted to talk about this before we talk about the beginning of the season, of the second half. I mean, to me, watching Myers hit the ground in center field yesterday screamed, I think outfield is probably a must to pick up, particularly when we don't know. I mean, Brantley's a 50-50 chance, right, Brian?
Yeah. The problem, so they probably can't find a platoon level or potentially, bottom half corner outfielder. What's going to be difficult for them to find on the market this year is center field. The 3 best center fielders, if you read articles on sort of who may be on the market, are Brian Reynolds of the Pirates, Cedric Mullins of the Orioles, and Ramon Laureano of the A's. All 3 of them are not free agents until after the 2025 season, or maybe the 2024 season going into 2025, which means none of those teams need to trade those players. I don't expect the Orioles to trade Mullins because, hey, they're kind of sort of in the wild card race now. And, that's a really, they may be thinking we could be really in it next year too, or the next 2 years when he's on the team. It would take an offer that would blow those teams away. And again, I think that's where the prospect capital hurts. They have, between Chas McCormick and Jose Siri, a couple of outfielders who are, league average or maybe slightly below league average. Siri's glove is outstanding. His bat is,
non-existent.
He hits a home run every once in a while and he'll let you know it. You understand why he likes to watch it so much, because it's so rare.
Doesn't happen very often.
Hey, as hot as it's been in Texas this summer, the air that he generates from those swings is very much appreciated if you're at the games.
Jose
Well, I was
Siri,
just thinking
ERCOT's player of the year.
That's right.
I was just thinking that the Astros could package Phil Maton, Siri, and McCormick for Mike Trout. You don't think that's going to happen?
Well, would the Angels be willing to throw in Ohtani in that deal?
Yeah, well, they probably need to as a sweetener.
Yeah.
The thing with Ohtani is he doesn't have a spot on the right. You don't know what he was supposed to be. Is he a pitcher? Is he a hitter?
So the Astros do have a very interesting first 5 games, and I'm interested in your takeaway as how you would approach that. And we'll start with Andy first, but it seems like to me, it's survive the doubleheader and focus on winning in Seattle. And I think they're actually starting Verlander in Seattle, which tells you that that's what they're doing. Andy, first, let's go over your grumpy old man reaction to this stupid schedule, because not everybody has it. And then again, how you would approach it. And then we'll get to Brian.
I am amazed. I guess I shouldn't be surprised at this point in my life, but I am amazed that Major League Baseball continues to do things to screw over the Astros franchise. And what I mean by this specifically, and it's very minor and it's very nitpicky, but if you operate under the premise that the Yankees are the premier organization and every team should just be thankful that they come to visit you once a year, why would you make them a doubleheader in a team in a city that there's a big rivalry? And Yankees fans are even starting to admit, hey, this last 7 years, there's been a big rivalry between these two teams. Getting them to acknowledge that hadn't always been easy. But we're going to waste one of those home gates by making it a doubleheader on a Thursday after the All-Star break, when only a third of the teams are actually playing. And we're not even going to start that last game until 5:40, because guess what? The Yankees have to be somewhere else the next day, and they're traveling 2 time zones. So starting that game early, it's just asinine the way that they've made this up. And this is beyond the fact that I know they didn't really have to make it up, because they didn't have to cancel the games at the beginning of the season, because they didn't have to have a lockout. That's all, neither here nor there. Beyond those 2 games, I have seen Astros Twitter, because we're all very afraid of the Mariners now, because the 9-game lead is, insurmountable, or there's no way we can maintain that. Let's just say the nuclear option happens, and we lose 7 games to the Mariners this month. There's still all of August, all of September, and a week in October of games to play against not great competition, because I don't think we play another team with a winning record currently until September. So worst case scenario, you run out of this month somehow tied or trailing the Mariners, which isn't going to happen. But let's just say that happens.
Yeah.
We're not going to quit playing for the next 2 months of baseball. And then even if all that happens, there's 3 wild card spots. It's just, it's mind numbing how our fans are so myopic and so scared of anything that they perceive to be a challenge. And frankly, a team that's 9 games back on a streak that's historic for them, it's taken that historic streak for them to get within 9 games of us. This is the conversation that we had about the Indians, I think, in 2017 or 2018, when they won 25 games in a row or something like that. They shot all their bullets in the regular season, and they were gassed by the time the playoffs started. It didn't matter how they finished. And it's going to be the same thing. This is a team that is hot in July. Talk to me when they're hot at the end of October.
Well, and the other thing you could point out too is some of that competition you're talking about is actually only going to get worse, because they're going to be sellers at the trade deadline, and they're going to be, losing that. Brian, one of the things that irritates me is, I understand, I guess, the need for the doubleheader to fit stuff in. Why not put the doubleheader in during the other time the Yankees came, as opposed to having this weird 2-game series where now 5 Astros and the 2 Astros and the coaching staff have to fly here, play 2 games, fly back west. The Yankees are doing the same thing. It just seems like, to Andy's point, not only is it the Yankees and they're the Yankees, but anybody with a brain can tell that those are going to be the 2 best teams in the American League this year. Why handicap both of those seasons when you could have figured out a different way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, for most other teams, we're playing division. So this was scheduled to be the 2nd series of the year. The first series of the year was scheduled to be the Astros hosting the Phillies. That'll be made up in the last 3 games of the season. And so what they did is take, okay, what do we do with the rest of the games? Well, for a lot of other teams, those 3 games were against a division team. And so they found an off day, or they just added it to another series.
Yeah.
It's harder for the Astros and Yankees. And like the A's, they were talking about this in the broadcast this weekend. The A's are hosting the Tigers for 2, and the Tigers got to go to the West Coast and then back for 2. So it's worse for them. On the other hand, the A's had to play a home game at Detroit's Park to make up for this,
we'd have been really pissed if that happened.
Yeah, yes. So Yeah. I think the reason they played the doubleheader here as opposed to the other one is it was in between a whole bunch of games for the Astros leading into the All-Star break. They took away an off day from them because they had to. So I think they're a little bit better off having it, as weird as it is, after 3 days off. The bigger issue is it leads into a set where they don't have an off game for 2+ weeks.
Yeah. I think August 9th because is it August 9th is the next off day, I think.
Yeah. And
so how do you approach this Seattle series, Brian? Then, I mean, do you sort of, I almost say take a knee on the New York thing, hope you split, and really put your effort into beating Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously it won't be, so it won't be Verlander because he pitched on Saturday. So he'd be happy to pitch on Thursday, but Astros will push him back maybe to Friday, maybe to Saturday. It won't be Odorizzi. So it'll probably be Urquidy and Garcia. So I do hold out the possibility that they call up Hunter Brown as the 27th man to make his major league debut in this. This is one possibility if they want to sort of stretch out their starters a little more. But I think I'm less confident that'll happen than I was a couple weeks ago. As far as the Seattle series is, look, it's a doubleheader. They're gonna do 2 catchers. They're gonna, put some guy in the field will be their DH. They will rest guys. They'll use all 13 guys on the active roster in both games, like every other doubleheader, and like frankly, I expect the Yankees to do on the other side. Because they have to travel here and then travel back to Baltimore. So it won't be the ideal situation, but both teams are way up in their division, have 99% chances of winning their division. And when we might get a really good game against the Yankees in Minute Maid Park? In October.
Andy, I really don't like how Brian doesn't whine with us. He's always so like, here's logical. Like, we want to be mad.
I will admit my bias. Anything that comes out of the MLB schedule making office, I'm going to dislike immediately. That's always going to be my first reaction is I dislike it. And then I'll look at it. I don't like this. I think it's dumb. I can't imagine the Yankees are big fans of having to go to Houston for a doubleheader instead of having the extra day of rest with their veteran team. I'm far more interested in what happens after that. What I want to see Thursday is Yordan Alvarez taking at bats in at least one of those games, if not both, to get his timing back, because I care about what he hits against the Mariners. I'd like to see Altuve's leg working. So whatever bruise he has below his knee, I hope he's running well. I'd like to see our outfield defense actually look like they know what the hell they're doing, because they haven't during this A's series.
Yeah, it was definitely rough. All right, let's do something a little fun as we wrap up. This was this weekend, I believe, was the anniversary of the Justin Verlander trade, or we're getting close to it. I don't remember exactly. So the Astros have traded for Justin Verlander, they've traded for Yordan Alvarez, and they've traded for Jeff Bagwell, which happened to have to be 3 of the most one-sided trades of in baseball history.
The Joe Morgan and Rusty Staub trades are revenged.
Right, exactly. And I think that the Red Sox
supposed to be happy. He made me think about Spec Richardson. Damn you, Brian.
Okay, now we can all be mad.
I think the Verlander trade is the most one-sided of those 3, because the Red Sox at least got a functional Larry Anderson for one playoff run. Brian, which do you think of those 3 as the most one-sided?
I would put the Verlander trade, because the benefit of the Verlander trade was Verlander throwing 16 shutout innings in the 2017 ALCS, winning the MVP of that and getting us to the World Series. He pitched fine, but not outstanding in the World Series. And so that to me puts that over the edge for, again, 3 prospects, RIP to Franklin Perez's arm, because he was the top prospect in that deal and his arm blew out on him. So RIP to him, to his arm.
Yeah, the only thing they changed that metric is if Yordan hits a walk-off in a World Series. So
which I'd be fine with,
Which I would also be fine with. Andy, what about you?
Right now it's probably Verlander, but Jordan Alvarez is so young. So there's so much time for him to continue to build on the legend of the Josh Fields trade. And I will say this for the Dodgers, they got 3 seasons-ish out of 2.5 seasons out of Josh Fields. He showed up, for those appearances with a 2.61 ERA, had a decent FIP, threw 118 innings. So it wasn't horrible, although he did melt down in the 2017 World Series, which led to his exit from the league because the Astros destroyed his career, which is ironic. So right now, today, I think it's Verlander. I think he's passed up Bagwell. Bagwell's deal is probably second, but Jordan Alvarez has so much runway that I think if you ask this question again in 5 years, we're going to be having a different answer.
Yeah, Jordan could get us to a World Series like Verlander did, and he could win an MVP. There's a ton ahead of Jordan Alvarez in his career.
Absolutely, and I'm excited to be here to watch it. I guess as we're going to be back Monday. Have been 5 games in 4 days. What does success look like to you, Andy, and what does disaster look like? Or is disaster possible?
Disaster is always possible. Nothing's impossible, Jim. It's just improbable. I see that regardless of what happened this past weekend, the Astros had won 10 series in a row, and I think 10 road series in a row. That streak still continues. So I want to split with the Yankees. I think that's probably the most likely outcome because they're 2 pretty evenly matched teams. I see taking 2 of 3 from the Mariners. And nobody getting hurt. And the other thing I want to see this week is some clear definition on what Michael Brantley's immediate future is, because that's going to determine what happens trade deadline wise, or at least it should for the next 2 weeks.
Brian, what about you?
Yeah, success is 3-2. Disaster is 0-5.
Yeah, and I think Andy's point earlier in the show, even if the Mariners win all 7 games, the Astros still have a 2-game lead. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I don't see it seems hyperbolic to think you're chasing a team down when you have fewer games than you are games back, because that's how you really make up ground is head-to-head games. But we'll be back on Monday. Guys, have a great week, and go Stros.
Okay. My kids at camp, so at sleepaway camps, my wife and I get to take an adult vacation this week. I will enjoy that very much. Go Astros.
Go Astros and Ricola.
Go Astros is a presentation from Twitchy Dolphin Media and part of the Let's Get To Baseball Network.